shows a real understanding of the pressures that the Queen was going through, and that the best way he could support her.
The royal family has seen its fair share of drama, but what Princess Anne just revealed is unlike anything we've ever witnessed. In an unprecedented move, Anne has shared a deeply personal message from the late Queen Elizabeth, one so powerful it left King Charles absolutely speechless. And the subject of this bombshell? None other than Catherine, the Princess of Wales. What could this message possibly say, and why is it shaking the very foundation of the royal family? Let's uncover the shocking truth. A message that changed everything. King Charles had no words when Princess Anne shared something he wasn't prepared to hear. In a quiet, personal moment, she revealed a message passed down not through ceremony or paperwork, but from one mother to one daughter. The late Queen Elizabeth, long seen as the firm center of the monarchy, had left behind a personal reflection, one that had nothing to do with tradition or titles, and it wasn't about Charles or even William. It was about Catherine. Anne spoke slowly, carefully. She remembered every word clearly, because it wasn't just another royal conversation. It was the kind of moment that stays with you forever. The Queen, aware that time was catching up with her, chose to speak not about crowns, but about character. The Queen had seen more than just Catherine's public image. According to Anne, her mother had quietly watched Catherine for years. How she carried herself, how she handled pressure, how she kept her composure, even when chaos circled around her. She didn't speak just to be heard, and she never made scenes for attention. She was steady, consistent, and never allowed her emotions to outpace her judgment. The Queen hadn't said that Catherine would rule. She didn't talk about power. Instead, she spoke about trust, who she believed could carry the heart of the monarchy through a time when everything else seemed to be shifting. That person wasn't the next in line. It was the one who held the family together without trying to be seen. This wasn't a public declaration. There was no royal speech, no letter sealed in gold. It happened in private, just Anne and her mother. No one else around, no advisors, no cameras. It was simple. Two people, both born into duty, talking honestly before time ran out. Anne didn't share the Queen's message with anyone right away. She kept it close. She knew the Queen had trusted her to pass it on only when the moment called for it. And now, with the family facing challenges on every side, it felt like the right time. She wasn't looking for headlines. She wanted the truth to be heard, without the noise. Anne said her mother didn't believe in overcomplicating things. She watched quietly, and she made her decisions with care. And in Catherine, she saw something rare. Someone who wasn't shaped by royal ambition, but who grew stronger because of quiet service. Even when the press picked apart every move, even when critics questioned the future of the monarchy itself, Catherine remained constant. That, Anne said, is what her mother saw. Not a perfect person, but someone reliable. And in the Queen's mind, that mattered more than anything. William is clearly being prepared for the throne. That's been expected for years, but even he has often pointed to Catherine's calm nature, her way of making people feel at ease, her strength during difficult moments. It's possible that the Queen, in her final reflections, wasn't thinking about who had the crown next. She was thinking about who could carry the values behind it. Catherine's role in the family has been both praised and criticized. In 2023, many noticed the numbers. Princess Anne completed over 400 official engagements. Catherine, on the other hand, had a little over 100. The comparison sparked debate. Some said she wasn't doing enough. Others felt she wasn't showing the same level of dedication. But people who know the royal family closely explained a different story. Catherine's schedule was lighter not by accident, but by intention. She had chosen to focus on raising her children and building a strong home, one that would shape the next generation of the royal family. She wasn't stepping away from responsibility. She was preparing for something larger than 1 year's count of public appearances. The Queen's quiet standard. Princess Anne didn't make her mother's words public for drama or attention. She waited. And when she finally did speak, it wasn't to suggest that Catherine should rule. It was to remind the family of what the Queen had valued. The Queen had never believed leadership was about being the loudest voice in the room. She didn't see public duty as only being about long speeches or formal visits. She respected those who were consistent, those who stayed grounded, those who carried the work without seeking attention. And those were the things she had seen in Catherine. Even during hard times, Catherine didn't chase headlines. She didn't speak out of turn. She didn't let pressure break her focus. And that was exactly what the Queen believed the royal family needed to survive whatever came next. Anne made it clear that her mother's message was a quiet observation. To understand why the Queen placed that kind of confidence in Catherine, it helps to go back to Catherine's early years. She was born on January 9, 1982 in Reading at the Royal Berkshire Hospital. Her family didn't have royal titles, but they weren't struggling either. Her father, Michael Middleton, was a flight dispatcher. Her mother, Carol, had been a flight attendant. Both had worked for British Airways, and they raised their children with a strong sense of discipline and ambition. What made Catherine's background unique was the contrast between her two family lines. On her father's side, there were quiet connections to British high society. Her great-grandparents, Noel and Olive Middleton, had once hosted members of the royal family in the early 20th century. That gave the family a degree of social familiarity with the monarchy. But her mother's side painted a very different picture. Carol Middleton's relatives came from working-class roots. Some had worked in coal mines. There were no estates, no inherited fortunes, just generations of labor, survival, and eventually, social mobility. Catherine grew up with both of those stories shaping her world. She understood tradition, but she also knew the value of hard work and personal growth. And perhaps that's what made her stand out. Not just to the Queen, but to those watching the monarchy change around them. Catherine's early life gave her something rare: stability at home, exposure to the world, and a strong sense of balance. She didn't grow up inside palace walls, but she didn't grow up far from them either. Her parents, Michael and Carol Middleton, had both worked for British Airways. It wasn't royalty, but it was respectable and disciplined. They raised Catherine in a household that valued work and composure. When Catherine was just 2, the family moved to Amman, Jordan. It was a big shift, especially for a toddler, but it opened her eyes early to different ways of life. She attended an English-speaking nursery school, and while they returned to Berkshire 2 years later, that short time abroad had already planted something in her: the ability to adapt. Back in England, Catherine joined St. Andrew's School. She was only 4, but she had already learned how to settle into new environments. Over time, she even began boarding part-time. That's not something many kids do easily, but she handled it. Then, in 1987, something changed for the entire Middleton family. Catherine's mother started a small business called Party Pieces. It sold party supplies through mail order, and while it may have sounded simple at first, the business became very successful. That success gave the Middletons a more comfortable life. Catherine and her siblings now had access to great schools, new opportunities, and a support system built on ambition rather than entitlement. Her mother's business also showed Catherine how success doesn't always come from status. It can come from building something step by step and putting in the work, quietly and consistently. In 1995, the family moved again, this time to Bucklebury. The area was quieter, more rural, and it gave Catherine the kind of peaceful upbringing that helped her stay grounded. She first enrolled at Down House School, then transferred to Marlborough College. It was at Marlborough where she began to shine, not just academically, but as a leader. Catherine became a strong presence in sports, particularly field hockey. She didn't just join the team, she captained it. Her leadership wasn't loud or attention-seeking, but it was effective. She also earned the Gold Duke of Edinburgh's Award, which involves physical challenges, volunteering, and learning new skills. That award isn't easy to get. It showed that she had already developed qualities like teamwork, quiet strength, and a steady kind of perseverance. At one point during her school years, she needed a minor operation to remove a lump from her head. It wasn't widely talked about, and Catherine herself never sought attention for it. She simply handled it and moved forward. That kind of quiet strength would later define how she approached royal life, too. After finishing school, she was accepted into the University of Edinburgh, but she chose to take a gap year instead, not to relax, but to learn. First, she studied at the British Institute in Florence, diving into Italian art and culture. Then she joined the Raleigh International Program in Chile, where she helped with community work, environmental projects, and hiked through tough conditions. She didn't choose luxury. She chose a challenge. Before starting university, she even worked briefly as a deckhand at the port of Southampton. That job came with no fanfare, no spotlight. It was just another way to stay grounded and learn the value of effort. The turning point at St. Andrews. Eventually, Catherine began her university studies at St. Andrews in Scotland. She started in psychology, but switched to art history. There, she joined the Lumsden Club, a student group focused on fundraising and community service. Even during her academic years, she stayed involved in service. To support herself, she also worked part-time as a waitress. It wasn't flashy, and she didn't do it to prove anything. She simply didn't see herself as above it. That was the pattern of her life. Work quietly, stay focused, and let actions speak. In 2005, she graduated with a Master of Arts in Art History with second-class honors. But long before the degree, people around her had already begun to see something different. She didn't just blend into her surroundings, she strengthened them. Catherine had a calm energy about her. She listened closely, carried herself with quiet confidence, and nothing about her felt forced. Everything she did felt natural, as if she wasn't trying to impress anyone. That quality became even more noticeable during her years at the University of St. Andrews. It was here, surrounded by ancient stone buildings and lecture halls full of art history books, that her life shifted direction. She met Prince William during those early days at university, and the two quickly formed a close bond. At first, they were just friends, sharing study sessions and a mutual interest in art. Their connection strengthened over the course of a year, built on familiarity and trust. By 2002, they decided to move into the same house with a few other friends. It wasn't a sudden leap into romance. It was something that had grown slowly, steadily, and by then, the friendship had evolved into a relationship. Despite being part of a social scene that drew constant media attention, they kept their relationship mostly under wraps. It wasn't until 2004 that the public got confirmation. They were photographed on a ski trip to Switzerland, and suddenly, their quiet story was on the front page. The years that followed weren't perfect. Like many young couples, they went through their own struggles. In 2007, the two broke up. Catherine later reflected on that period, saying she had been unhappy at the time, but realized it helped her grow stronger. It was a setback, but not one she allowed to define her. The split made headlines, yet she didn't crumble under the pressure. She gave herself space, stepped back, and moved forward quietly. But it didn't take long before they found their way back to each other. Their reunion was a quiet decision between two people who had been through enough to know what they wanted. As the public watched, the relationship continued to deepen. The media wasn't always kind. Catherine was called Waity Katie, a name that implied she was simply waiting for a proposal. But instead of reacting, she held her ground. She didn't rush anything. She didn't respond to gossip. And she didn't let it affect her. In November 2010, the engagement finally came. After nearly a decade of knowing each other, they made it official. And as that chapter began, Catherine made one of her most symbolic changes. She started using her full name, Catherine Middleton. It was a quiet signal that she was stepping into a different world, one of history, duty, and global attention. The wedding on April 29, 2011, was both massive and personal. Held at Westminster Abbey and watched by millions, it marked the moment she became the Duchess of Cambridge. For most, it looked like the beginning of a fairy tale. But for Catherine, it meant something more complicated. It wasn't just about wearing a title, it meant taking on responsibilities that few ever experience. Her life now involved official appearances, public service, and learning how to navigate the complicated world of royal protocol. But she didn't change who she was. She adjusted, learned, and stayed consistent. Building a family. In the years that followed, Catherine and William became one of the most visible royal couples of the modern era. Their first child, Prince George, arrived in July 2013.
For months, the world had been waiting for this moment.
The world welcomed him with excitement. 2 years later, Princess Charlotte was born in May 2015. And by April 2018, the couple introduced their third child, Prince Louis. Louis quickly became the most unpredictable of the three. With his playful energy and bold expressions, he brought a different kind of charm to royal public life. Even as he waved, fidgeted, and made faces during official events, he became one of the most loved figures in the family. Catherine wasn't just smiling for the cameras. She was building a home behind the scenes. She showed up at events with professionalism, but her priority was clearly her children. Parenting in the public eye came with constant pressure. But she didn't let it overshadow her role as a mother. What made her different wasn't just her position. It was the way she approached it. She remained grounded, stayed close to her family, and never lost sight of her values. While the spotlight was always on her, she didn't chase it. Instead, she chose to focus on work that meant something. Her charity efforts were quiet but effective. She contributed in ways that were personal and real. One of the most striking examples came in 2018 when she donated 7 inches of her hair to the Little Princess Trust. The organization makes wigs for children who lose their hair during cancer treatment. She didn't announce the donation publicly, and her name wasn't attached to it in any official capacity. But the gesture spoke volumes about who she was. Her hairdresser, Joey Wheeler, had brought up the idea. She decided to do it anonymously, knowing the gesture would matter most to those who needed it, not to anyone watching. The act echoed Harry Styles' ponytail donation in 2016. Quiet, simple, and deeply personal, Catherine showed that not every kind act needs a spotlight. At an event hosted by the 1851 Trust, she watched students excitedly engage with science and technology activities. She noted how inspiring it was to see children connecting with education in new ways. There was no vague comment about the importance of education. It was specific, clear, and focused on what was happening in that moment. Catherine's connection to charity didn't begin when she became a duchess. It started well before, during her 20s. In 2007, she curated a photography exhibition to raise money for UNICEF. Her interest in photography had been steady since her student years. Over time, the public saw glimpses of her talent, particularly in the portraits she began sharing of her children. Those photos revealed her growing role in using visual storytelling to support causes. At the launch of Time to Reflect by Alastair Morrison, she was seen not only as a royal, but as a cultural voice. That same year, she visited Naomi's house hospice, where she spent time with terminally ill children. In 2008, she helped organize a charity roller disco that raised £100,000 for Oxford Children's Hospital and Place 2BE, a mental health organization for young people. These weren't symbolic appearances. They laid the groundwork for what would come next. When Catherine married Prince William in 2011, she officially stepped into the public eye, but she quickly used that platform to give back. Just before the wedding, the couple launched a gift fund that allowed guests and supporters to donate to 26 different charities instead of bringing presents. It was one of the first public signs that this new royal duo would treat their roles as a form of service, not ceremony. As her role evolved, so did her causes. In 2011, Catherine became a key part of the Royal Foundation, first started by Prince William and Prince Harry. It later became the Royal Foundation of the Prince and Princess of Wales, reflecting Catherine's growing presence and leadership. That shift also mirrored the way she was no longer seen just as the wife of the future king, but as someone shaping royal priorities from within. Expanding the reach. Catherine's focus sharpened most around children's well-being and early development. In 2020, she helped launch the Royal Foundation Center for Early Childhood. The idea was simple but powerful, changing how society values the earliest years of a child's life. She spoke openly about the pressures families face, from bullying and bereavement to domestic instability, and she made it clear that early support could prevent bigger problems later in life. As part of that mission, she helped launch the 5 Big Questions survey, inviting the public to share their thoughts on raising young children. It was a direct way of listening to parents and caregivers, gathering feedback that shaped future programs. Her work in this space wasn't about policy papers or one-off events. It was about reshaping long-term thinking. Her royal duties expanded quickly. In 2014, she became patron of the Royal Air Force Air Cadets, taking over from Prince Philip. It marked her increasing involvement with youth programs and military families. Around the same time, she partnered with organizations like Action on Addiction and the Forward Trust, supporting families impacted by substance abuse. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Catherine quietly joined the Royal Voluntary Service, helping to deliver food and check in on the elderly. At the same time, she and Prince William made financial donations to mental health initiatives, recognizing the growing strain people were facing during lockdowns. Her work wasn't just tied to high-profile causes. Catherine became a key supporter of children's palliative care services and regional hospices, like Tai Hafan in Wales. These were personal visits, where she listened to families talk about the challenges of caring for terminally ill children. She made space for them to be heard. In 2025, she joined Prince William as joint royal patron of the Royal Marsden Hospital, deepening their connection to cancer research and patient support. During her visit, she toured areas used by oncology teams and spoke with staff about the importance of creating comforting spaces for patients. Her role was active, informed, and consistent. Catherine's work with children's palliative care, addiction recovery, and mental health wasn't limited to polite speeches. She collaborated with experts, backed new research, and even helped reframe how the public talked about these challenges. There was never a moment when her charity efforts felt performative. They've always been deliberate, sustained, and grounded in genuine concern. Her sense of duty didn't come from obligation. It came from understanding what her position could do for others. What sets Catherine apart isn't just the scale of her engagements. It's her approach. She didn't chase headlines. She didn't compete for public sympathy or demand admiration. Her work speaks for itself, and that silence, that absence of spectacle, is what makes it powerful. Even now, as Princess of Wales, she continues to evolve. New responsibilities bring new challenges, but her response remains steady. She doesn't pivot for popularity. She builds on what she's already started. What began as quiet efforts during her student years has grown into a career defined by service and long-term impact. And that's what makes Catherine's story so compelling. She not only married into the royal family, she earned her place by showing up, staying consistent, and putting in real work when no one was watching. So now the question is yours. Do you think Catherine has redefined what it means to be a modern royal? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.